on this episode of Couch Conversations.
It's like whatever boundaries you set, your market might not like them, but they will accept them if you're serious about it.
Welcome to Couch Conversations, a podcast for women who want to chat about real life issues. Hi, I'm Courtney B. Reiley. We're talking about what it means to be a woman of God today, how to find purpose in life, and how to deal with tough conversations. So grab a cup of coffee and join us on the couch for some good conversation. All right. So welcome to the Women of Influence podcast. I'm Courtney Reiley, and I'm excited to have a friend of mine, Michelle Pippin, here today. Yes. Michelle, I'll intro her for any of you that haven't heard of Michelle or haven't met her. Michelle is the founder of Women Who Wow, which is a mentoring and coaching platform for seriously driven women entrepreneurs that now has members in every state and 7 countries. Pretty impressive. And I just wanted to give a little plug myself, shameless plug. I have worked with Michelle over the last few years off and on things, and she is the real deal. So I can vouch. If you know me, I don't vouch unless I mean it. And she has helped transform my business and just me as a seriously driven entrepreneurial female in many ways.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. So I'm excited today. We're talking, this episode is called Brutal Boundaries. And transparently, the reason I had this topic kind of come to the forefront and asked you to speak, Michelle, I have had to make some tough calls within my family recently. So I have 2 kids, a toddler and a teenager, as many of y'all know, which is a thing in itself. But with my teenager, I had to make some tough calls. And they were hard to make, but they were the best calls for us. And I knew I was being obedient. I sought the Lord and sought that peace and found it. And I still have it, even in the midst of the repercussions of that. But I really found clarity when I was going through that season of having to make that decision, when I looked at Jesus in the temple, flipping tables and so on and so forth. Because I feel like a lot of times we hear about the Jesus that washed feet and was gentle and carried the lamb and loved the children. And he is that. But he was also a Jesus that came in and set those people straight and was like, this stops now. This isn't what my Father's house is supposed to be used for. And then he pointed them in the right direction. So that kind of freed me in that space to make some tough calls that were in love and in wisdom, but they were not, rainbows and unicorns. So I wanted to talk about today, brutal boundaries, because I know that you've always been a woman that stands in your boldness, and I've seen that in working with you, but I've always felt like you've done it with wisdom and grace and love. So there's boundaries, but it's not in order to cause offense, if that makes. So brutal boundaries and just your walk with that. Have you always been good at that balance? Any story you want to share on how you've come to where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that as a young child, I was a lot more tender, I guess, than I am now. I went through kind of like a dark night of the soul when I was in college. It's like the best of times at the worst of times. And I learned to become, fiercely independent, not in all the healthy ways, right? Like I think that I grew to, not let people in or not trust people in certain ways, or not trust people to come through for me, I guess, in certain ways. So anyway, I don't think I was always really great with boundaries. But when I was an adult, right? So when I graduated from college and I got married right away, and we had Summer, my oldest, and then shortly after, then Shelby and CJ, I learned that if I didn't put up boundaries against whether it was like picking up someone's prescription or visiting, if I didn't start putting up boundaries, then everybody else's agenda for my day or my week would crowd into my life. And I think that's when I got good, because my heart was for these kids, right? This growing family and my husband. And in the end, I was unwilling to let things creep in and overtake what I held most dear, right? So I think I got really good with it then. But it's funny that you mentioned why you're having this, topic on the podcast. And Jesus was, he had 2 very different personalities reserved for 2 very different populations, right? So, and it's kind of the way we are with our husbands, but I'll give them an analogy in a second. But to people who belonged to Jesus, right? Like the people who had said, I'm yours. He was brutal to them, right? The tough love really came in. He expected a different set of behavior from people who said, I'm yours, right? To people who had not said that, right? He was largely like unrestrained mercy, right? And love. And it was like his mercy draws us in. So in the example you used in the temple, these are people who claimed religion, right? And nothing infuriated him more than that, right? And so, and it's funny because in church, we often run into that. A lot of people claiming religion, but then acting in these ways that hurt other people. Not that we all don't, mess up, but that's what he really like raged against. And it's similar to like how we are with our husbands, right? Like my husband, your husband, they dated before they, met us, right? And we give zero thought to that. We don't think about those women. We don't even it's not even a thought. But once they said, I'm yours, right? Now we might feel differently if they start dating. You understand? And so, but for me, like the boundary were in the Bible, like I kind of used everything for me. It's like it either lines up with the Bible and it's true or it doesn't and it's not, right? And so with boundaries, like there's some great verses in the Bible that help us. Like I think it's Galatians, I don't know, 6 or something. It says, let everyone carry his own load, right? And I learned early on, I was carrying a lot of loads that weren't mine. And no wonder I was feeling exhausted and overwhelmed and all of that stuff. And so I started looking at how I'd set boundaries. And I think when Jesus set boundaries, even frankly, when God set boundaries with the design of the earth, right? Yeah. They're always rooted in truth and growth and in a lot of times protection, right? So when you got to make those tough calls, it's like, where's the actual truth here? A lot of boundary pushers skew the truth, right? Like they make it murky. And he's like, where's the real truth here? And then it's like, where's the growth? Sometimes people put up boundaries today because it's easier to put up a boundary than it is to dive in and do the hard work, right? And I see this a lot in families. And I lost my brother almost 9 months ago. And that was not an uncomplicated relationship because my brother struggled with mental illness and traumatic brain injury and addiction. And there are plenty of well-meaning Christians who would encourage severe boundaries and cutting him off and, whatever. And that never felt true for me. I grew a lot in the diving deep into that relationship. So truth, what's the truth here? Growth. I don't want to shortchange my growth or somebody else's. And then protection, right? Because sometimes you just gotta step in and protect, right? Quick example. When I don't want to reveal too much, but when my kids were young, your kids look at you as an example. So if you trust someone, if you're happy-go-lucky with someone, they trust them, right? And I was at a little league football game, and a person was there who is a known and admitted pedophile. Frankly, he shouldn't have been there. He should have known within 400 feet. He came up to me, and I didn't shake his hand. And my kids saw a difference, right? They saw a difference. And my great aunts were pretty furious with me and they called me out. They're the matriarchs of the family, right? So whether it's my hair is too long for my age or like whatever, right? So they called me out. It wasn't very Christian of me, right? Like I should forgive him. I said, it's not my role to forgive him. In this thing, I had to put up a boundary to protect my kids because it's like that was the truth, the growth, and then the protection, right? And you're never going to be cheered for these boundaries, but if it's rooted in those 3 things, then I don't think you can really go wrong.
Yeah, I love that. I think, and back to when I was going through I'm still in it, but when I was making that tough decision in my own life, in our family, I did have people very close to me, like family close, that did not agree, and didn't understand. And I remember I actually had to call my sister and say, I'm really having a hard time because, there's some, disagreement around this decision is making hard. And she just said to me point blank, she's probably a lot like you, just truth and love, right? Together, truth and grace. She said, it sounds like you're at a point where you are going to have to make a decision. Are you choosing this because the Lord led you here and you have peace about it? And are you going to stand by that regardless of what other people think? Or are you doing it because it's not that? And I really had to, I mean, it was like in that moment, I was like, you're right. I just needed that kick in the pants of like, if God has given me peace about this. And I do relate to, I agree. I think there's a lot of times people use the word boundaries as an excuse to be cold-hearted or, to dismiss people that they should care about and we're called to go out of our way for. Yeah. And so it's not meant to be that, but boundaries are important. And I love your point about when you were making them around your kids. I think the motivation and the thing that has helped me, encourage me, or allow me to make those boundaries when it's tough is I remember and I stay focused on who I'm making the boundaries for.
That's right. Or even sometimes what you're making the boundaries for, yes. Right? Right. Boundaries are, they keep certain things in and certain things out, plain and simple, right? And so it's like when you put up a boundary, you got to know, what are you doing it to keep in and protected? And what are you doing to keep out, right? And so to me, I feel like it's and there's boundaries all throughout the Bible, right? And not to get political because it doesn't really matter, but when there's a bunch of hoopla about like building the wall, right? Regardless of how anybody feels about that, someone said to me, yeah, somebody needs to get back to their Bible and figure out what God said about building a wall. And I'm like, well, actually, there's an entire book of the Bible in Nehemiah about rebuilding the wall, because a city or a nation without a boundary was shameful, unsafe, right? And a laughing stock for those around them, right? And so, it's like the boundaries in the Bible, whether it's like the who told the ocean it could come this far and no further, right? Yeah. Or the boundaries around a city or a nation state, they were all made to keep certain things in and certain things out. And I think that's even more important than who am I making this for, right? Because sometimes the boundaries are between humans and you can't pick, right?
Right.
Like,
yes.
So it's like, what am I making it for? What will this keep in? What will this keep out? And if you have to make like sometimes in the biblical times, they would dig trenches, right? Because if they were at siege, they had to get out to get water, and bring it in. And so sometimes with boundaries, you've got to make trenches that you can allow certain resources in or communication or conversation in, but still keep the boundary up. So
I like that. What a great, good analogy. I love that. So we talked a lot about family. What about in business? Because that's your, specialty. Working with businesses, do you find a lot of entrepreneurs that struggle with setting boundaries? Is it usually like a startup, a newer or a established or?
It's all across the board, right? It's all across the board. Businesses are just like kids, right? They're going to grow in the direction we lead them, essentially, right? And so if you start your business where you are overgiving and having no boundaries and all of that, then it's going to continue on that path. If you start with a bunch of boundaries, but you're lax with them, right? There's tons of by the way, master classes and courses and programs on setting boundaries. I'm like, no, that's the easy part. Defending boundaries, that's the hard part, right? Yeah. And so in business, it's I actually just wrote about this to our members like a few days ago, right? Because you can find yourself over-serving. And what that invites in is disrespect, right? Whether it's disrespect for your time or your schedule, it invites in distraction, right? It invites in disappointment and discouragement because you're overgiving and you don't have time to do the work to build your own practice. And it's crazy because this is where Satan thrives, really, right? When we are discouraged and distracted and disappointed with how things are turning out, right? That's Satan's playground. He doesn't have to have me like hooking on the street to make me miss my purpose, right? Right. See, distracted's good enough.
Yeah.
And that's like, so to me, I feel like in business, it's so important to define your role, right? Like it's not savior. It's not emergency responder, probably, depending on the business, probably not those. It's like whatever boundaries you set, your market might not like them, but they will accept them if you're serious about it. Like as an example, I don't do text. I think it's one of the rudest things ever because texts just come in without you answering it, right? And so I keep it off and I tell people, I'm like, they might send me a text. I'm like, 3 months later, when I'm at a live event, I'll turn my texting back on, or, I have a VIP day flying in and I've got to keep my text on for something like that. And then a message will pop up. I'm like, I don't do text, right? And you've just got to make your boundaries work for you. Again, what is it keeping in? It's keeping in your best energy, your best work. It's protecting like your ideas and your ability to serve in a zone of excellence and genius, right? And
your relationships with your clients, people that you are obligated to. Yeah.
And that's why it was so easy for me to get really clear about my boundaries when the kids were young, because I knew that over serving my business meant I was undercutting my family. And I'll be honest with you, that was not going to happen. It was not going to happen. I wasn't going to work nights because my kids were home. Because you know what that meant? I was missing out on Chris. And I wasn't going to get a sitter because that just wasn't my thing, right? Also, I couldn't find one. But I didn't want a full-time sitter. I wanted to be with my kids full-time. And so that severely limited my business, but I made it work within those boundaries because I was so passionate about what I was doing, right? And I was going to say, like in the Bible, in Proverbs somewhere, it says that an easy answer turns away wrath. And, it's like you got to be, if you are serious about brutal boundaries, you don't have to be brutal in your response, right? It can be, a soft answer will turn away wrath. It's in Proverbs like 15 or something, but it's like have a plan for defending that boundary, right? It doesn't have to be you go skewer someone who comes close, right? Yeah. It can be a very soft, like if you're new to boundaries, I always recommend taking a deliberate pause. So you say, hey, Michelle, can you swing by the pharmacy and pick up my prescriptions on Tuesday? And in my head, I'm thinking, well, the pharmacy is like 5 minutes up the road and she needs me to do it. Of course I can, right? But if you're struggling with boundaries, make it your habit. You struggle with saying no. So make it your habit to say, let me check my schedule, right? Just make that your habit. It's new commitment. Somebody asked you to go to the grocery store, pick up their kid from school, anything. Hey, let me check my schedule. I'll get back to you. Number one, most things will show up not as urgent as they once seemed. Yeah. Two, a lot of those people will say, oh, never mind, I'll get it. Three, they will start realizing you do have a schedule of your own, right? That matters, because if you're the yes woman, then they think she must have been waiting for me to give her something to do that day. Right. So you want to have a soft answer. And then if you decide to say no, if you say yes, right, like we can give and serve and feel good about it. If you say no, then you have a chance to give an empowered no. Like, hey, I'd love to pick up that prescription, but it doesn't work for me on Tuesday. I'm really dedicated to my content or whatever it is. Right.
And something I've realized in that, I love that. Something I've realized in that is that people are often watching you. These are women of influence. They were all women of influence in some sphere of influence, whether it's our homes, our churches, our communities, our business. But people are watching, especially as a leader in some capacity, how you respond to things. So I think even being able to have that pause and teaching them boundaries, or those, would you say confident no or strong no? Empowered no. They're watching you live out boundaries. And that has a ripple effect to encourage others and encourage them that they have space and they have permission to have boundaries.
And not the least of which is our daughters, right? Like, so I've got 2 daughters and they're both young women now, right? And so they have grown up seeing me sometimes definitely over serving, right? But largely protecting boundaries, saying no, addressing when boundaries have been crossed. They've heard, all of these things and they've learned from it, right? And then and in business, it's funny because a lot of times we overserve and overgive in business because we're afraid that if we don't, then, people will leave us or they'll stop paying or they will, whatever. And the truth is, like, I get more members within Women Who Wow because of my boundaries. I can't tell you, I just got referral the other day from somebody who said, she's thriving. She's a doctor. She runs this clinic and she's thriving, but she's struggling with boundaries. So I sent her to you, right? Or I will have people who will first say, like, can we set up a complimentary coaching session about joining Women Who Wow? It's, $897 a year. No, we're not going to set up that, either come or not,
Yeah.
And a lot of times, like, people will push back on that, but they'll join because they want to run their business like that, right? They don't want to be beholden to like cajoling people to join and being available all the time. And and I'm quick to say, even when I had like private clients, I said, I'm not in the emergency business. There are no emergencies here. There aren't. So
Love it.
we'll keep a appointment.
Yes, I love it. I think that's so people watching you and gleaning from the way that you have boundaries, they're encouraged to have boundaries of their own. And I think that at the root of, would you agree? At the root of a lot of this is people pleasing, right? Because I bet that what you just shared that happens in business, it happens in the church. It happens in our families. But it's, I think, rooted in a people-pleasing disease, that's rampant.
Oh, yeah. And honestly, the church needs to do better with that, right? When someone is over-serving at the church and, people-pleasing at the church, and, obviously they're not at home when they're at the church. The church needs to step up and say, hey, your first mission is at home, right? And I appreciate your help, but you need to be at home more. And so I think the church has a role in that. And it's funny because people pleasing is, I remember there's a verse in the Bible, and I have no idea where it is, but it says, that Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man, right? And so, and I loved it because it's like, as he grew in wisdom and stature, he pleased God first and then man, right? And in Galatians, Paul is saying, listen, what am I trying to do? Please man? Because if that's my intention, I'm paraphrasing, but if that's my intention, then I'm not pleasing God. So I think that people pleasing, it's about that intention. And usually, and I hate to like throw this in the lap of your listeners, I guess, but a lot of these people who are people pleasers, they go outside as a martyr, right? And they act like it's all like, I'm just such a giver, and it's all these other people, and it's about them. And it's like, no, really look it in the mirror. You're people pleasing, and it's all about you. It's all about what they're going to think of you. It's like the lens of your life is on you when you're people pleasing, right? Because it's all about, will they like me? Will they accept me? Will they affirm me? Will they say I'm such a great person, right? And so it's really quite a little sign of hubris, really, right? When you get down to the core of people pleasing.
It's pride. Yeah,
absolutely.
And I have to, what do I say? I tell people I'm a recovering people pleaser. Like, I lived that life. When I say I'm a recovering, because I really feel like when you're in it, it is like an addiction. It is like an addiction to a substance it's the high of being, lots of following or engagement on something, or, favor and applause. And then it's a fiending for it. And, when you don't have it and you need another hit of it. It is. But what's cool is, I'm living proof that God delivers and redeems that. And it does, in my experience, take a breaking and then a growing, because to revive something, it needs to die. And that was my journey.
If somebody is listening and they know that they are people pleasing, and they're starting to see that it has such a root of just pride and feeling, thinking of yourself, right? Even as it looks altruistic, if they're listening and they're feeling that way, I think we've all been there in different seasons or different parts of our life or what have you, right? And it's like, don't wait for the break, right? The solution really is take the lens. It's almost like walking around with, you're in selfie mode, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, just turn the camera around, right? Focus on God. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Let me get this relationship straight, right? Let me go to the source for that affirmation, for that acceptance. Let me go there. Let me just accept what's mine as like a birthright, right? And then I'll decide my schedule, and then I'll decide how I deal with people.
Yes.
Right? We can turn that lens around at any time. Funny story. I was watching this live stream of kind of a famous business person. And she was doing like a Facebook Live in selfie mode, right?
Okay.
And she needed us to see something like behind her, right? But she would not take herself out of it. And she's like, I can't figure out this way. I can't figure out how to show you guys it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you could turn the camera off of yourself, right? And then just show it. It never even occurred to her. You know what I'm saying? Because her lens was so, it's got to be about me. And so I think we've all been guilty of that, right? And so if you're listening and you want out of the people pleasing, like it's a daily choice to focus on pleasing God first, right? And that'll start to weed out people pleasing naturally, really.
Yes. Yeah. Because we're called to, lay ourselves down. Right.
Yep.
And it's a pride and it's a lack of trusting him, which again, we've all go through seasons of walking through that. But it's a pride that keeps us thinking that if we don't take care of ourselves, or we're equipped to take care of ourselves and manage life, and it's a fear or a lack of trust that we're holding on to, because we're not saying, I know he has what I need and he has the ultimate, his ways are better than mine. His thoughts are higher than mine. I'm trusting him. Even if it looks messy, it doesn't look like the way I would do it. Yeah. So very cool. I will say one of the things, I think it was an analogy you told me, it was a couple years, it was years ago. And I've shared it a lot. It was the kids in the back seat. So I remember there was a moment where you really helped me clarify the difference between serving and pleasing. And you said, if you have kids and they're in the backseat of your minivan and every day on the way home from picking them up, they cry to you for McDonald's, McDonald's, we love you, but they're crying to you for fast food. Let's just say, if you give it to them every day, you will please them. They will be happy. They will sing your praises. You will be liked and all of that, but you are not serving them.
That's great. Yes. That's a great analogy.
Yeah. And that came from Michelle Pippin.
I make it up and then I move on, but I love it. I love that analogy. And I remember us having that conversation, and there is such a great difference between serving and pleasing, right? And like, Jesus was the great example of that, right? He served the world, but he didn't please a whole lot of people.
Amen.
Not even his own people, right? Not even his own family. And so the serving and pleasing is so, it's just such a great little boundary. And it's really too, I make it in business, I make the differentiation between like impact and impression, right? There's a lot of, talk about, you want to impress someone, dress to impress, speak to impress, right? Like, and we have like a measurement of impressions, right? Like how many impressions did you get?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. I'm okay if I've impressed you in some way, but I'd much rather impact you, right? I'd much rather make a difference. I'd much rather have something shift or change so that I do leave that ripple effect, right? Like, I think that's so important. And I think that the analogy of the McDonald's is such a palpable one for people when you're in that people pleasing mode. It's like, is this pleasing them? But again, not acknowledging truth, not, allowing for growth, and perhaps not putting up that measure of protection, right? Or is it serving them, which is anchored in truth, allows for growth and also protection, right? And it's like those are they should be our pillars, really.
Yes. So as we wrap up, is that you just wrote something about over serving? Is that something that people can access or share? Are you sharing that with?
It was, I can give it to you if you want. It was, you probably already got it, but it's an an entrepreneurial espresso. So I'll just shoot it over to you and you can share it to what you want.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I think that would be insightful. And then I know you gave some words of encouragement for, women that are struggling to, maybe they're in that people pleasing, they're struggling to set boundaries. What about any women listening, just a word of encouragement or anything you'd want to share or leave them with? If they are someone that does have boundaries, they haven't gone too far, to the shutting people out and boundaries becoming a wall, right? They're in a healthy space and they are walking through some backlash, some storms because of that. What would you say to those women listening?
Yeah. So as the rock star, a rock song goes, like every storm runs out of rain, right? But storms are just also a part of life, right? I wrote recently, and it is a public post, but like a lot of times we have this view of like, why not me? Or why me? Why me, Lord? Why me? As if like we've done something wrong to deserve the storm, right? And the Bible's clear. It rains on the just and the unjust, right? So sometimes it's a storm that is caused by something that we've done, right? Sometimes it's a storm that's a reaction to something that we've done that isn't like a natural, consequence. It's like somebody else's fit throwing or whatever. But the truth is, it's like the storms are just part of life, right? We have to learn how to weather them in a way that is healthy for us and understand they do run out of rain, right? And that this too will pass. And so in that storm, it's like, who am I going to be? Right. A lot of times we focus on like, what am I going to do? How am I going to like make the storm run out of rain first? And how am I going to, whatever, right? Like we focus on what we can do. Step one, I'm a strategist, right? Like step one, step two, and going through like this deep period of grief that I've been in, I'm like, who am I going to be in this storm? That's what's critical, right? Who am I going to be? And that is what is, again, like that truth and the growth and also protection. I want to be patient. I'm going to be resolute. I'm going to be a woman of faith, right? Like, cause that's when, you don't need faith when it's sunny skies. You need faith when like, the ship's sinking, the storm is raging and you're out of plans, right? Like, so that's when you need that. It's like, who am I going to be? And after everything happened with my brother, I had a lot of questions, and I think for mostly well-meaning, but some who don't like my faith angle, to be honest, right? Their worldview is different. How does this, how did this impact your faith, right? And it's like, hey, my faith has never been in the fact that there will never be a storm. My faith has never been in some deluded idea that faith prevents bad things from happening, right? Or faith is not about who I am. Faith is about who God is, right? And God is still God. And so has it affected my faith? Only built it, right? Because it's not about me, right?
Yes. And I've been at the end of myself in this. And that's where he has even more space to fill.
Truly. And I can tell you, like, no matter what storm people are going through, and, they range, right, in intensity.
Yeah.
And like, I can quote the Bible and never know like where it is, right? But it's God is close to the brokenhearted, right? Yeah. He binds up their wounds. And I found that to be so true, like so true, that in the depths where you are at the end, like there's only one person who can come in, and he's close to the brokenhearted. And so claim that, be the woman of faith in the storm, and know that it won't last forever.
Yeah. And just remember that when he's binding up the brokenhearted, or when he's making you lay down in green pastures, that's whisper close.
Oh yeah.
No, I mean, and it's like, I'll wrap. I know we're at time, but I wanted to just share. I was sharing with someone once that had gotten a vision for somewhere she was going, and she was so excited about it. And I just kept feeling like this impressed to share with her, to encourage her, like, don't rush the process, right? And I gave her this analogy, and it impacted me. I don't even know if it impacted her as much, but it was like, imagine you got invited to this party in California and you're in Virginia, right? And you're like, I am so excited. Like, God's going to be there. Like it's just like this awesome thing, everything you could imagine. But in the road trip from here to there, which feels like it's inconvenient and long, Jesus is riding in the car with you. And it's like, instead of trying to rush how you get there, like, and miss that the party's going to be awesome, but man, you're never going to be like, that's that one-on-one sitting in the car. He's riding shotgun with you, like, or you're riding shotgun, So it's in those storms, like to your point, that he is the closest. Yep. He's literally binding up the winds. He's literally making lay down in green pastures. Keep on with the boundaries and be encouraged. And man, thanks for sharing today. I loved having you on here, and I loved like even connecting with this side of you.
Thank you. I was looking forward to it. So excited.
Yeah. All right. So where can people find you if they want to meet you and learn more about you before we run?
Yeah. So it's tribeofdrivenwomen.com. Not the tribe, just tribeofdrivenwomen.com. And that has all the places to connect with me and also like what you can find there. Direct message me or where you can find my content. It's all there.
No texting though.
No texting. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, we thank you for being on here. I appreciate you making time for this and have an awesome rest of your week.
Thank you. You too.
Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of The Couch Conversations. I hope you're inspired and ready to tackle the day knowing you're loved and have a purpose. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'd love it if you left us a rating and a review so more people can join us on this journey. We'll see you next time.